The presenting sponsor of OnEducation is Participate. Lately, teachers from all over have been working together to find new approaches to provide quality remote education. Participate's sister company, Participate Learning, presents United We Teach, a global gathering place for educators to share distance learning resources as we navigate these strange times. For these resources and more, visit participate.com/oneducation.
I couldn't work in that environment because I barely wear pants these days. Welcome to OnEducation, part of the On Podcast Media Network. My name is Mike Washburn.
And I'm Glen Irvin. Friends, we have an awesome pod for you today. We'll give you our takeaways from the 2020 election results, discuss whether genes should be allowed at work, how gaming has helped many through the pandemic, and our guest this week is the amazing Audrey Watters.
So we have a winner. I waited. We probably could have recorded the podcast on Wednesday, Tuesday, even. No, not Tuesday, but maybe Wednesday or Thursday.
Week, sure.
But we wanted to wait, and I'm so glad we did.
Just to
because
make sure
have a
that
winner.
that we knew for sure what the results were. I actually really thought it was very responsible for all of the different news stations to just wait, and to say that that's part of the process, that the votes do need to get counted, and that we shouldn't just declare winners as...
Other than people's like general anxiety and lack of sleep, which definitely I suffered, I found it very hard to do just about anything. Work, anything, since Tuesday night. And so I was ready for it to get called. Once it was obvious that Philadelphia was going to come through and Pennsylvania was gonna flip. Yeah. And, the lead in Arizona was obvious. Even if Georgia hadn't turned, I would have, I was ready. I was ready for them to call it, probably Thursday or Friday. But I'm fine that they waited. The speeches last night were absolutely amazing.
Yes.
Kamala Harris just sounds like she's ready to be the president already, and that's it was awesome. It was awesome. It was so inspiring, and really exciting, and it was so cool. The coolest moment I thought in Biden's speech was his speech on Saturday was that he addressed educators in the speech, which I'm not sure I've ever really heard, in a speech that was that big of a deal. That was his, it was his huge winning speech, right? His victory speech. And he talked directly to teachers and said, you have an ally right in the White House. And I think that I feel like that, I'll be honest, if you know anything about, political gamesmanship, every word of that speech means something. It's like the State of the Union, right? You
very
have
well
to
crafted. Yes.
You have to fight for that content, and every word is recorded in the annals of history. That is a big speech, that educators were given time in it and told explicitly that they had people on their side now means something. I think it means more than even the emotions that we're feeling about it. It means way more than that, and I think we'll see that as we see Dr. Biden really plant her flag in some of these issues that educators really, really need to have dealt with. And now we have someone that is going to literally have the ear of the President of the United States to make things happen.
Yeah.
It's really it's exciting. It's thrilling.
Yeah, it was. They were amazing speeches, as Nicole and I, my wife and I, were discussing just how amazing the speech writers are and how they craft every single word is so important, as you described, Mike. There was some references in there to past literature and just obviously historical references. Mm-hmm. And then he called himself, Joe Biden said, "I'm just Jill's husband," and basically saying that the issues that are being brought forth, in this case, educational issues by her, will be heard and they will be addressed, and it will be a presidency with addressing these at the federal level. And even with President Obama, though there was a lot of educational things done, there was a lot of risk taking done in education. Some of those things that happened didn't come to fruition, but I do appreciate that they were trying to take risks and trying to go in multiple ways instead of just what's always been done. But I think this is going to be one of those things where we're going to be listening to an educator instead of just someone who thinks they know about education. It's so different. Just mm-hmm. Even the people on the outside, on the perimeters of education that think they know what's best for us, don't really know what's best for us until they've done the job. So, yeah, 100% agree about the speeches and about the way that I felt yesterday. We had a little mini party. I mean, it was just my wife and I and my kids. Right. But we celebrated here in the house, and just the sense of relief and joy that we can feel, and lighter step. As you're walking, you're
I was just about to say, what it feels like? It feels like a 320-pound weight has just been lifted off of, frankly, the world's shoulders, not just the United States. Like people kept, I got DM, like I was pretty animated on Twitter over the last week or so about all of this. And people, I got a couple of DMs about being so engaged in it. And it's like, this affects all of us. Yeah. The United States pulled out of Paris climate agreement, and that affects me. Free trade agreements affect me. Yes. My company that I work for is based in the United States. That affects me. Our sister company, Participate Learning, was incredibly impacted by the policies of Donald Trump related to visas and work visas and stuff like that, because they bring teachers in from all around the world to the United States to teach. And that impacted them unbelievably. My entire livelihood and the health of the world and the stability of the planet. There's this one thing kind of going on, was all impacted. And it's just like we all just lost a 320-pound weight that was wrapped around our necks. And that, everyone is just a little bit happier today. There is still tons of work to do.
Well, yeah, there's a time where I was just thinking about, I saw some posts already about, but we still have blah, blah, blah. It's like, you know what? Take the time to celebrate, because
can we have 5 minutes?
It's been a long 4 years. Yeah. And a lot of things have happened in those 4 years, a lot of negative things. It's okay to celebrate right now. And then, of course, just like when, even within the speed, there is a bunch of work to do. There's a bunch of
got to go win Georgia. Got 2 runoffs in Georgia. Got to win them.
Yep. And there's a ton of different things that just need to, in order for the country itself to be able to move forward. Number one being that we need to get a hold of the pandemic and do what the science is telling us to do so that we can move past it. That's what I was just thinking about when you were talking about affecting the world. When the center of the pandemic is based in the United States and it keeps growing every single day at crazy rates. Yeah. That's the first priority on my mind. That's the one thing that's affecting us day in and day out as educators, is that specific topic. So super excited, like you just said. Feels like I can, even when I clean today the house, I'm going to be joyful cleaning. That's what it's going to be.
Oh, boy. Well, listen, congratulations, America.
Yes, thank you. We did it.
You did it.
Yes.
Thank God.
It was close, but we did it.
And I'm so happy for you. I am, we were talking about this before we went live. I am addicted to opening up Pokemon card packs, and I've literally got them all sitting right in front of me, just staring at me, just waiting to be opened again. I've been watching people on streams open them, and I don't know why just watching people open packages of cards is entertaining, but it is. You should do it sometime.
YouTube. Yeah, that's a big thing. Opening things just in general on YouTube. Those are some of the biggest channels, yeah.
And playing the trading card game online. So taking the key cards that you get from the card packs and putting in the codes and getting the Pokemon online and then playing the card game. And I thought of you because you play Hearthstone,
yes,
which is another card game. And I figured you might be into Pokemon and playing that card game as well. I don't know if you're into other card games.
Yeah, no, I mean, I found Hearthstone fascinating because it reminded me of Magic the Gathering, which I played way too much and spent way too much money in college.
Oh, yeah?
Just doing kind of like what you're talking about, except, I mean, I never truly collected for the collection's sake. It was more like you were trying to get some of the more powerful, whatever, cards that you can go ahead and get in packs. And then Hearthstone is right up that alley. And then my sons, especially my youngest son, is super into Pokemon and taught myself and my father-in-law how to play. And he's so dang good. I mean, first of all, at teaching things, he's really, really does a great job as far as walking us through how to play it. But then just at the game itself, he's just like a destroyer.
Oh, wow.
He's like, sorry, Pops. Got to be able to... I'm going to put all this damage onto you. Uh-huh. So it's a super fun game. I actually didn't know much about it. I knew of the concept of the game, but I never had played it much. And it's super fun. It's a very, very fun game. When we were talking before the show here, I was just saying the one thing that I find interesting, but I haven't played enough games of it. So it maybe is not as it doesn't happen as much, is the draw mechanic in the game. It felt like very like you had to draw the specific right cards, in order to be able to do well in the game. So I just got to play more hours of it.
It's funny. I went through a game the other day, I think it was last night, where I didn't draw any energy cards for like the first 5 or 6 rounds. And it's like, if you don't draw energy cards, you can't do anything.
You're toast. Yes.
Right? And then this morning I was playing, and all that I needed to win was to draw a Raichu so that I could evolve my Pikachu.
Yes.
Because the Raichu is super powerful. And I was like just dying to get, and I'm like keep like cycling through draws and using my trainer cards that have like free draws and stuff like that just to get this damn Raichu. And it was so I feel what you're talking about. I know exactly what you mean. But yeah, no. So if anyone wants to play trading card game online with me, send me a DM and we'll exchange whatever user ID you need to exchange. But I'm into collecting so I've been setting aside like the rares and the secret rares and the full holo art and stuff like that ones. And I've probably spent about $350 on cards in the last couple weeks. But I've easily made that in the value of the cards that
It's super
I've
fun
been
to do.
able to I've been able to pull, including I haven't pulled like the Charizard. So there's the reason why. Okay, so do you know why this is popular again? Because there was like a flashpoint for this.
No.
Pokemon's always been popular.
Yes.
But and I hate to say who started it again, because the person who made it like take off again is a loser.
Okay.
But it is what it is. It's Jake Paul, the YouTuber who is like a complete tool. Did some videos where he was opening up Champions Path boxes to try to get the full art holo Charizard that's worth like $1,000.
Ooh.
And he did.
Ooh.
And it's not a hard pull necessarily. It's just it's for some reason it's worth a ton of money.
Yeah.
And that became like a flashpoint. And now, like, if you go to any store right now and look for Elite Trainer boxes, they're all sold out. Like, you can't find them right now.
Super popular.
Yeah, so I found a Champions Path Elite Trainer box just like a week or so ago, just randomly at a store, and I was like, do you have any idea what this is worth? Like I told so there were two, and so I told the cashier, listen. I said it super serious too. I said it exactly like that. I was like,
Listen.
okay, you've got to listen to me. I'm buying one of these. They were $124 each.
Well,
I said, I'm buying one of these. I was talking to her. I said, you need to buy this for yourself.
Okay.
You need to hide it right now so no one else can buy it.
Okay.
And then you need to go and put it on eBay.
And just sell it
It was
outright.
a college kid, and she was, and you will pay your rent next month. Because the Champions Path boxes are going for like $500 or $600 on eBay.
Jeez.
So I could have bought that box for $125 and just sold it on eBay for $600. I didn't. I opened the cards.
Yes.
But you know, she didn't realize what she had, so I had to explain to her that this is one of the hardest. I was tempted if it wasn't like a 20-minute drive to the mall that we were at, like that we found it at.
Yeah.
I'd just go. Like, I just don't want to I just don't go places anymore. I don't know. But I'd go back there and see if it's there. So, anyways, I found an Elite Trainer box today at EB Games. Sorry, like it's GameStop. GameStop is called EB Games in Canada.
Sure.
So I found an Elite Trainer box and I bought it, and all the cards are sitting in front of me because I'm going to open them as soon as we're done. So yeah,
so
Pokemon. So I'll talk Pokemon with anybody, and it's been a lot of fun.
Yes.
You have on here talking about a conversation on Twitter.
Yes.
And the tweet says, this is super funny, because I feel like this is like a way easier answer than it should be.
Yep.
Any legitimate reason that teachers should not wear jeans on a regular basis? I mean, isn't the answer just like no?
Yeah.
Is it more complicated than that?
No, it isn't. But it is at many schools. It is. There's all these dress code policies, especially with educators, whether or not they could wear or can wear jeans, and sometimes it's limited to Fridays, and sometimes you have to pay $1 or something like that.
Yeah.
To wear your jeans, all of which I find so dumb. So many.
Well, they usually give the money to charity and stuff like that.
Yeah, that's true.
So,
but,
I mean, I don't. I just. But the idea that clothes define your professionalism. Is so 1975 that I just can't even. I just picked a random number. I don't know.
That's the year I
don't know
born.
what year that so is, but it is so not 2020.
Yeah, I added to the conversation, and I was just saying that when I started working, there was dress code policies for the educators and the students. I mean, dress code policies for students do currently exist at most schools in the United States, but they have to do specifically with not wearing anything that has to do, obviously, with drug and alcohol references or any type of hate messages, which all makes sense. But then some schools also extend it out to how much clothing, especially I think a lot of our females, as far as in our schools, have a lot more dress code policies like that govern what they actually wear, which is a different conversation, but along kind of the same lines. And even like what I'm wearing right now, and you are wearing too, hoodies. Hoodies are so putting your hood on is so is on so many dress code policies against it, like being able to put your hood up as far as a student.
Because your brain changes as soon as you put the cloth over your head. You don't think the same, Glenn. I mean, so the waves get blocked.
I knew it had to be some kind of science.
By the fabric.
Yeah.
And then your head stops working. That's why you can't wear the hood.
And I think it has to do.
I'm surprised you don't know this.
I haven't read up on that science. I thought it had to do supposedly with safety stuff or whatever. I have no idea. It's silly. This school that I work at right now is the first school that I have ever worked at that allowed students, high school students, to wear hats. And when I saw kids in the halls wearing hats, baseball caps and, winter caps, whatever, all kinds of different things. And I saw them wearing, I'm like, oh, what's going on? It must have been hat day or something like that, because that's what they had at different schools that I've been at. Like during homecoming, there was one day that was a hat day. You could actually wear hats. But no, they have actually allowed it. And you know what, everybody that's listening out there, it hasn't changed anything discipline-wise at all.
It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. The kids are kids, and letting you wear a hat or not wear a hat or your hoodie or whatever it might be has zero effect on the education that's actually happening in the school. So just so everybody knows that out there. But anyway, for the jeans thing, there's a lot of things that govern it. And at that first school, not only there was some specific rules for the kids, but there was also for the teachers. And you had to, Mike, if you wore any kind of shirt, even a t-shirt, it had to be tucked in to your pants.
Rad.
Imagine that rule. And then the other stupid rule was I had a bunch of, I think during that time I was into wearing little polo shirts with like Nike symbols or a college football team or whatever it might be, like a symbol, you know what I mean? On an icon symbol on the polo shirt.
Yeah.
Couldn't wear those. Can't wear anything that has any kind of logo, whether it was a corporate logo or whether it was even a school logo. Like one day I got in trouble, Mike. I had bought this shirt. I just liked it because I liked the color, to be honest with you. And I did like the logo. It was the Stanford Cardinal red shirt with the logo that had the big S with the kind of a tree. They have a little tree
in trouble.
I had to go home and remove it, put on a different shirt because of the Stanford logo. That's how silly.
Sorry, you were a teacher?
Yeah. It was my first year teaching. Isn't that incredible?
An adult.
Yes.
A grown adult.
Well, I was 23. I don't know how grown I was.
And you got sent home.
Yeah.
For poor behavior.
Yeah. Isn't that super weird? Like the things that we get obsessed about. Cool. That's what we've talked about on different shows.
Yeah.
But this is one of those things. Can teachers wear jeans, or should they be able to wear jeans every single day or whatever they actually want? Yes. Obviously, wear whatever you want.
Yeah.
Everybody has different styles and different things that they enjoy wearing, different comfort levels, on things.
Yeah.
By the way, I just bought some new jeans. I know this is probably not a good time. And I haven't bought jeans.
Tell us about the new jeans, Glenn.
I haven't bought jeans in 10 years, everybody.
That's funny.
But my waist size has changed. Let's just put it that way.
Oh, boy.
So
it's
anyway,
all that candy you eat.
Yes, I bought these new jeans. And why didn't anybody tell me that jeans have changed so much and they're so much more comfortable?
They are way better now.
They have some kind of elasticy features, and they're so much like more. They feel like seriously, they feel like jogging pants. And I know this is an educational podcast, but everybody, if you haven't bought new jeans,
is what Glenn is saying. Go buy jeans.
They're amazing, and I'm gonna wear them every day to work. I wear different kinds of things. I wear like a dress shirt with the tie and jeans. I mean, that's a weird combination, Most people probably don't do that, but that's what I like. I like to wear some things like that. Sometimes I wear polo shirts, with the school's mascots and whatever it might be.
Storm.
Storm gear, yes. So anyway, really weird. I hate that exists. We should move beyond that. It's
I was
2020.
thinking
Come on, everybody.
I couldn't work in that environment because I barely wear pants these days.
So you're wearing shorts almost every day. It's because you get to work from home.
We'll call
though.
that shorts. Okay.
Yes. Thanks for that visual, Mike.
Sounds good.
I guess that's enough on this jeans story there.
And I am a professional.
Yes,
some
you
would
are.
say. Some would say.
You are a professional.
Yeah.
And you get to wear whatever you want. Yes.
Yeah. I wake up and I sit at my desk, and it doesn't change, anything about, my professionalism.
No.
What I'm wearing.
Not
or
at all.
Not wearing. So
agreed.
So dumb.
I know. So stupid.
That we just spent 10 minutes on this.
I know.
But also,
I did get to tell you guys about my jeans that I just bought.
Yes, we got the story of Glen's wardrobe, which is, really if that's the price we paid to have to get that story, then
it was worth it.
Right, that's what I'm here for.
It was 100% worth it.
That's what I'm here for. So, listen, if you're
God.
a school administrator and you're forcing your educators to wear or not wear certain clothing, just stop.
Stop.
It's really stupid.
Yeah.
You have lots of more important things to do than care about what the hell your teachers are wearing. So stop it.
Yes.
There. I'm sure everyone's listening and doing exactly.
I know. Now they're like, okay, we'll stop.
Well, Mike told me. And he doesn't wear pants, so.
Good.
There's a lot of interesting ed tech stories.
Yes.
And it's funny, we're going to talk to Audrey Watters, who is going to hate that we're talking about all of this stuff because, because she's Audrey Watters.
Yeah.
But nevertheless.
Yes. We're still going to do it.
It's our podcast, Audrey.
Yes.
You can't tell us what to do. You can tell me what to do anytime, though. That being said, lots of actually, she might like this. There are lots of really cool stories, happening, and we're gonna actually talk about another cool young entrepreneur in a few minutes, or at least this entrepreneur's product. But a lot of stories of kids doing really cool stuff in like the education space and the ed tech space, And tell us about this story that came across your screen here the other day.
So there is a high school student who basically was super frustrated by the lack of an organization, and probably everybody agrees that's an educator out there. A lack of a place where we can just search for the perfect ed tech tool that fits a specific solution, or have a variety of them that just spits them out at us. There's so many different things out there. Like there's blogs that have been written about things. I know Common Sense Media each year puts out, their top ed tech things that we've talked about on the show. There's podcasts like us. We've talked about ed tech tools that we really feel are powerful and that are must-haves.
There's the bests on YouTube.
Yes, there's the bests.
On Education's YouTube channel, the bests, #marketing. Carry on.
And we did that, and we've done some things like that. But if someone just needs to, by someone, I mean an educator or a student needs a specific tool, this student was basically saying, why don't we have a Netflix of online learning? Just basically, I can go to this place, like an Amazon too. I think they do an amazing job. And I search by what a specific category, and then it continues to break that category down till I have a set of choices that I can go ahead and go explore. And so she took it upon herself and basically used a website that had a kind of like a database functionality inside of it, and started basically creating it herself. And started putting together some of these things to say, okay, we have all of these different tools. What category does it fit into? And we've talked about this, Mike, too. One of the reasons why it kind of semi-related to this, not about an ed tech tool, but just about educational lesson plans. One of the reasons why Teachers Pay Teachers is so popular, is truly they do an amazing job on you easily being able to search for a keyword search engine, whatever their search engine is amazing. And I have to give them that, because it quickly gets you not only what you're looking for, but what other people have said has worked for them. Yep. Now, there's all kinds of things that are broken within it itself, but wouldn't that be awesome? And that's what the student was basically doing, is she was like, wouldn't it be great? She invested $19 to host the website, and it's called elearn.fyi. And it's a database of more than 300 online learning tools, and it's categorized by grade level, subject. And it would be amazing if it was even one step further. Is the part that I thought of too, is where we were able to give reviews on those, kind of the ups, the positives, and the not so positives of being able to do that. And I know that some places do exist, but there's not just this one place. The Netflix, the Amazon.
The Netflix of ed tech.
Where we could just go look, find the stuff, have 5 different options, and then be able to go ahead and quickly, apply, go search out, oh, this might actually work for the specific thing. So congrats to this student who is just amazing. Her name is Sophia Jaffe, and she was in 11th grade. And she's right around you, Mike. She's in the Toronto area. So great job, Sophia. Students are amazing, innovative. They find solutions to things. Yeah, it just made me happy just reading that story. Nice.
And so we've interviewed another great young ed tech entrepreneur who is no longer like doing this as a student, but the CEO.
Yes.
So one of our very first interviews, like probably 5 or 6, maybe 7 or 8 in, we interviewed what's his name from Gimkit? Josh from Gimkit.
Yes.
Yep. And Gimkit has taken off, right?
Oh my goodness. It is. He's doing so well with it. It started off basically even in our interview with him at the beginning of this podcast, basically a few years ago, we were interviewing him and all he wanted was a better solution to a quiz type show than Kahoot. And we just had a conversation about Kahoot and the $1 billion valuation or whatever. It was some ungodly number of their valuation. And he wanted a better solution to that. And him and one of his teachers basically put together this company product and developed the whole entire thing from the ground up. And now they have a newer feature. One of the things he has been posting about on social media was that he was forced into a specific type of writing when he was in school. And so he eventually hated writing. He hated that writing had so many conventions around it. So in other words, like things like the 5-paragraph essay and so on and so forth. He understood that there was a reason for that type of writing at times, but it also took away from just creatively writing or writing for different purposes. Blog posts, those types of things. I don't think whenever
not worrying about a grade.
Yeah, exactly. Or just writing in general to improve on that craft and then to continue to grow it. And so what he's done is he created a subset of Gimkit that you get with the Gimkit subscription. So you get this also, and it's called Gimkit Inc. And I've went through and explored it and played around with it. And you know what the best part, 2 best parts. 1, it's super simple to use. Number 2, it allows you to go in whatever direction you want to go ahead and take your writing without any of the conventions there to tell you you're doing something wrong. So it just lets you, it's a great way to just get writing, pushing out writing. And too, Mike, as a person that writes, blog posts and your book, the most important part about writing and the hardest part is just getting started with the friggin' write. Just sit down and then don't feel
writing
like
is hard, man. Writing is super hard.
Don't feel like something is inhibiting you and pushing you in a direction. Instead of thinking too much, it's just pushing stuff out there, putting that out there on the computer or on pencil or paper, and just producing that. and then eventually turning that into a crafted piece, whether it be a blog post or an essay you're submitting or whatever it is, or just writing in general, just being able to do that. And as I read through his story and the reasons why he came up with GimKit Inc., I was like, I can see the reason why you would want to use this. As a teacher in any content area, any grade level, super easy to get started, super easy for the kid to share with you or to share by publicly. I mean, you can share publicly, but not really publicly within your classroom, to all their other classmates if they wanted to. And just a way to be able to do that without a whole bunch of restrictions, but with some guidance towards a specific thing. So I have, I got 3 access codes, early access codes from GimKit Inc. Yes. And I have used one of them for myself. I got a personal invite code, but they've also given me 3 different codes that I can give away to any of our listeners. And what do we want them to do, Mike, to be able to get one of those access codes? We'll just DM them to you.
So Glenn is going to DM you an access code, and all you have to do is we haven't asked for Apple podcast reviews in quite a while, probably a year. So, it's nice to get some new ones in there. So all that you gotta do, my friends, is clickety clack over to Apple Podcasts. And speaking of writing, write us a review.
Yes.
If you're listening. And what we'll do, Glenn will do this because I can't actually, believe it or not, as a Canadian, I can't actually see the U.S. podcast store.
Oh, I know, you
reviews.
can't. Yes.
So any of the reviews that I see are from Canadians, and then Glenn sees the ones from Americans. So we'll look and see if there are any recent ones. We'll take all those names. As long as you make it obvious who you are in the review, or send Glenn a screenshot of your review by DM. And then we'll
send you a code.
We'll pick a few people and send you a code.
Let's do it. Yes.
Let's do it.
Yeah. Get out there, write us a review. That would be amazing.
Smash that review button. Can we say that?
And you're going to really like this, different take on GimKit. I just love that he was like, he's like, I don't like the way Kahoot works. It's too repetitive. I'm going to invent something else. He did. I didn't like the way that I was forced into these conventions to writing. I want something different. He created that. I mean, this kid is ridiculous. We got to have him back on the show too. So we'll have to
you just go and do it.
Yes.
Which is awesome. It's a great lesson. It's a super great lesson.
Great lesson.
We're in the middle of a pandemic. God. Thanks, Captain Obvious.
Yep.
And I'll tell you, we just finished talking about Pokemon a few minutes ago. But gaming in general has been really good for me to get my mind off of, the nonsense that is going on. And I think it's helped. So I've been streaming on Twitch, for example, up over 300 followers on Twitch, on my personal Twitch channel.
There you go.
Twitch.tv/Mr. Washburn, #marketing. Go over there and follow me. I stream 3 or 4 nights a week. Yes. But I think gaming has been good for everybody. It's been that bright spot, and I mean, it's been great that we've had games. I think in particular there are 2 games that have really encapsulated what we needed from gaming in the shittiest year in the history of all years. So we're talking about Fall Guys and Among Us.
Yes.
Thank God for Fall Guys and Among Us, right?
Yeah, they're super popular, but not just with kids. That's what's amazing
I love
about
them
it.
both.
Yeah, they're popular with it's the barrier to entry is very low, number one. So you can come in, you can start figuring out stuff, and yet they both have an aspect of like high level gaming, high level thinking. And I was even thinking about, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and her playing Among Us and it being such a humongous stream of people watching her play. And you know what I was seeing in her eyes and in what she was talking about just in her actions was joy. That's it. Yeah. When Michael Matera talks about sometimes in his presentations that he gives or his keynote addresses, and he talks about basically that there's this aspect that we miss a lot just in teaching in general, and that's why he's so keen on gamification in his classes, is just this aspect of let's feel joy. Let's try to harness that and bring that out. And that's what you could see in that stream. And that's what you can see, obviously, with us. We laugh and crack up when we're playing whatever it is that we're doing. And that obviously, it says in this article here from the Wall Street Journal, it was already, the gaming industries were already a multi-billion-dollar industry. But it's like we found this whole new group of people that said, oh, I never knew that there was all of these games that fit, what I want to get out of a game. Who
would have thought gaming could be for everybody?
Yeah, and it really is. I mean, people that are playing Animal Crossing, people that are playing first-person shooters that for the first time, or people that are just playing these silly games like Fall Guys and Among Us, which is such an awesome, super fun, like I said, low barrier to entry types of games. Yeah. And anybody can play them. And you could talk about it with anybody, from my father-in-law, grandparents, obviously, to my kids, to my little 8-year-old, and all of them being able to have these conversations about Minecraft and Among Us and whatever else it might be, and be able to share in that, like we just talked about, in that joy, is freaking pretty awesome, especially for two big nerds like me and you that love games. It's great to see other people kind of join in and be able
finally catching on.
To catch on. Yes, catch on to that. So very, very cool. We'll make sure we share this Wall Street Journal article because it's really a great read.
It's it's been the worst year and a really interesting kind of, I'm not going to say it's been a good year, but there's been like these weird shining moments and the emergence of gaming as something that everyone has realized is special and meaningful is really a really neat outcome of a pretty terrible year. So that's awesome. When we come back, I'm so excited. I got a chance to talk to Audrey Watters before the election.
Ooh.
And we're going to have her next, so stay with us. Welcome to the podcast, everyone. Our guest this week is a freelance writer who's appeared in The Atlantic, Vice, Huffington Post, Edutopia, among many other sites. She's the author of 5 books with another on the way, and best known as the author of the Hack Education blog. And I'm so excited to have Audrey Watters on the podcast. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me back.
Anytime you want to come talk with us, you have an open invitation. You just slide into my DMs and it's done. I was just telling you before we went on live that I love reading. First off, you write so wonderfully. It's a craft, obviously, and you do it so well. Even when you're like dropping bombs, the writing itself is phenomenal, and so I enjoy it thoroughly, even if I disagree with you, which is not very often. I find the writing is fantastic, and so I have some things I'd love to unpack from stuff you've written over the last little while. And here, this is a great quote from you. Education technology as a field and ideology sits right at that overlap, but appears to be mostly unwilling to recognize its role in the devastation. It prefers to be heralded as a savior. Too many of its advocates refuse to truly examine the ways in which EdTech makes things worse or admit that the utopia they've long peddled has become a hellscape of exploitation and control for a great deal of the people laboring in, with, and under its systems. Like, there is just so much there. I don't even know if I have a question other than I would just love to unpack all of that. I think there's a huge theme going on with a bunch of the stuff that you're thinking lately, just related to this not being necessarily as good as we all thought it was going to be.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think if you think about the history of a lot of EdTech, particularly since the advent of the personal computer, the teachers, individual teachers at the outset, really had to be advocates, cheerleaders to get technology in the classroom, right? It was an uphill battle. And so I think for a long time it was an uphill battle. And I think that for a long time people were really just wanted to be evangelists for EdTech. There wasn't a lot of space in one's there wasn't a lot of space to sort of be critical of EdTech, because that's what everyone else was doing, was pushing back and saying, no, schools don't need to spend all this money on technology. But I think that that's really the mindset of 30, 40, 50 years ago, 40 years ago. And I think things are different now. I think that obviously politically, financially, things have changed. Technology companies, education technology companies are incredibly powerful, and they no longer need to have evangelists, although they still hire them. And I think that it's time to really reflect, not just sort of has EdTech worked, whatever we decide that means, or not worked, but what if it's made things worse? And I think that there are a lot of ways in which we can look at what's happening right now, which is obviously a crisis. We're operating in a crisis scenario.
Multiple, in fact.
Yeah, but I think that I think that certainly, at the very least, EdTech is not a silver bullet, right? It has not been the thing that has sort of fixed everything, right?
This seems like where smartboards came from, right? We might have talked about this a little bit the last time. This is one of my favorite punching bags, but this seems like it was like, no. You want this. And it did nothing, very little for the classroom. Yet everyone has a $20,000 smartboard in their classroom. Yeah,
I mean, it was one of those great examples of, I think, where no one or very few educators said, wow, what I really need right now is this giant piece of technology to take up like a significant chunk of my wall space, whiteboard space even, for activities that may or may not have been better done on the projector, for things that may or may not have been better done just with a whiteboard. But yeah, right. Schools spent a ton of money, and really a technology that wasn't going to change the way in which people taught, because it was designed as sort of the teacher at the front of the class. So replicating kinds of technologies that maybe now we would want to sort of ask better questions about, of getting students more involved in their learning.
There is a good argument to make for the idea that educational technology has made things worse. I can see that being a case you could make. What's a good example of that? I think there's a couple, but I'd love to hear from you what you think are some of the prime contributors to how education technology may have made education worse.
In some ways, I think that there are lots of things that we can talk about. I think that one of the things is, I think that because schools are spending so much money on education technology, what they're doing is they're outsourcing, and particularly public schools, they're outsourcing really a core part of their mission, teaching, really, to for-profit companies, and that really don't have, I think, a commitment to democratic principles, obviously, don't even have commitment to paying their taxes. So I think that really it's shifting. It's a way that I think is undermining public education by giving so much power to these technology companies. I mean, if you look at what's happening right now, too, it's like it's as though we can't even imagine another way of education happening right now than through technology. Like these tech companies have sort of colonized the way in which we imagine school happening, and I think that's potentially really damaging when you look at some of the other things that we could talk about, which is algorithmic bias, for example, or privacy invasions, or the ways in which I think some of the inequalities that we see in education already being exacerbated by ed tech, right? Giving everybody computers doesn't mean that everybody gets better, faster, smarter,
and is able to do computational thinking, even though you have the device that is in theory meant to be the guide for that.
I mean, I think we see, I think that research shows that oftentimes when affluent students are given devices, they do very different things with these devices, or they're allowed to do very different things with these devices, more creative, computational work than students who are given devices that are really used to do drill and kill. And I think devices that are often perpetuating some of the surveillance and policing aspects of school.
It's funny, some of the things you said that just there made me think of something we talked about on the podcast. I think it was even, well, not last week, but 2 weeks ago, about a tweet I saw where someone said, we've only been doing like modern education in the way that we think of modern education for maybe a couple hundred years at the most. Like my great grandfathers didn't go to like school the way that we think of school now. And like the history of humanities, long, citation required. So we think we know all of these things, but we really don't, in like this like grand scheme of things, know the impact of some of the decisions we're making. And we already think we're unwilling to think outside the box, to use a really terrible term, but it's like we've already set our ways that we should be teaching and learning, because we have all of these devices now, and it's like, yeah, we're good to go.
I think
it seems like we're resistant already, and it's like we barely know anything.
I think that's what's so interesting about technologies is, for a long time, back to these sort of cheerleaders for tech in the 80s, they argued that computers were going to change everything. But I think what we see happening is actually most often computers and digital technologies just replicate what was already happening, right? And so instead of worksheets, you do digital worksheets. Instead of writing an essay by hand, you write an essay in a word processing software. And I think but furthermore, some of the other things I think get even harder to change once they are literally in code, right? So, we think about the classroom that the interactive whiteboard was sort of imagined with a teacher at the front. It's pretty easy as a teacher. I mean, I guess depending on your school, but it's fairly easy to move the chairs in a classroom. You can pick them up, you can rearrange them. Not everybody has to be in a bunch of rows, but it gets a lot harder to rearrange the digital chairs, if you will, in software, because most of us aren't programmers, right? So we're kind of stuck with the way in which our sort of, this is a metaphor here, our chairs are arranged, our classrooms are arranged when we use technology. We just don't have the same amount of flexibility. And if we want to say, listen, this isn't student-centered at all, teachers know how to make some changes in their teaching, in the physical architecture of their class, in their practices. Right. But it gets a lot harder when you kind of have this other system, this encoded system sort of, put down onto your classroom. It's just harder. It's harder to change.
I got it. I went into the weeds on this one. I read this article, and then I just went off for like an hour reading a whole bunch of other things. Thorndike won and Dewey lost. You can't understand the history of education unless you realize this. I don't think you can understand the history of education technology without realizing this either. And I'd go one step further. You cannot understand the history of education technology in the United States during the 20th century and on to the 21st, unless you realize that Seymour Papert lost and B.F. Skinner won. Like, my head exploded when I read that. And I think what you're saying here, I don't want to put words in your mouth. So ed tech is more like Skinner than Papert.
Oh, yeah.
Is basically what we're saying. And it's funny because if you go to any ed tech conference, they're basically trying to convince you the opposite.
Oh, for sure.
It seems to me. And so dive into that because, man, oh man, it's a bombshell, to be honest. And when people, if you go into it and dig into what you're saying there, it's a revelation, to be honest.
Yeah, let me start with the first part, the Thorndike won, Dewey lost. That's a quote by education historian Ellen Conliffe-Lagaman. And she, I think that what she's saying is that the vision that Edward Thorndike had, he was a professor at Columbia. He was a behaviorist. He did a lot of experiments on animals and then used that to extrapolate experiments about learning. He's where the phrase "the learning curve" came from, right? Mm-hmm. That's how long it takes a mouse to sort of figure out the maze in order to get out, to be able to replicate the maze and get to the food. And so Dewey, of course, had a very different vision. Dewey was not in the lab. Dewey was interested in the community. He was interested in school as a democratic practice. He was interested in progressive education and a lot of politically progressive work in Chicago at the time. And really his vision, although I think it is a vision that I think is probably very near and dear to the hearts of many educators, right? We talk about inquiry-based learning or project-based learning as being sort of, again, we trace this back to Dewey, but the predominant sort of model of schooling is much more like Thorndike. It is much more about standardized testing, assessments, and measuring students numerically and charting them that way.
Sure.
Than it is about growth, and growth tied, I think, to democracy. And Skinner, of course, was also a behaviorist, probably the best known behaviorist, and really was sort of in that legacy of Thorndike, right? Beginning to work with animals and then making the leap from how animals learned or how animals could be taught to how children could be taught, and developing technologies that would train pigeons, and then train children. And that's really the origins, I think, of contemporary ed tech. Is a lot of it is behaviorism. And if you think about behaviorism, it really is sort of rewarding for good behavior, breaking things down into very incremental steps. I have a little side note. We just adopted a puppy, so I'm in the process of training my puppy, and this is how you train a dog.
Exactly how you train a dog.
You don't beat the dog. You reward the dog with treats when the dog does the right thing.
Right.
You give them immediate feedback, right? If the dog sits, you say yes, and you give her a treat. And so this is how, and I'm okay with treating my dog this way. I'm much less certain that we should be treating students, treating children, treating one another this way. But I think that is really the technologies that grew out of Thorndike are Skinnerism. And again, I think although the kinds of things that Papert talked about are very probably more aligned with Dewey, right? About the project-based learning, about hands-on experimentation, about the construction of knowledge by doing something meaningful.
Idealistic, even.
Yeah, that's Papert.
Yeah.
But that's not what our school system is. I mean, I think when I say they won, I mean, I think that we should, we've got to fight back. I don't think that this is sort of like conclusive. There's nothing we can do. All hope is gone. We're stuck with standardized testing, and we're stuck with, operant conditioning ed tech till the end of time. But I think we do need to realize that most of the stuff that we do is very behavioristic.
At the risk of hurting my feelings, maybe, is the way I'd say it. Is this what gamification is?
Yes.
Okay. It is, right? Like, gamification is Skinner, right?
It is very much Skinner. Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of the technologies that we use today, and it's interesting. I think, that could go off on a whole sort of tangent about the sort of amnesia that many people in tech seem to have about anything to do with the past. A lot of folks wouldn't tie this to Skinner, but I think that it is very much connected to Skinner. Again, you get rewarded. We want to reward positive behavior, immediate feedback. That is absolute operant conditioning. And it's the hard thing. It's a bit like training my puppy. What if it works? And then we have to say, well, that's great. My dog has excellent behavior. But again, humans, I believe, should have agency. They should have free will and freedom. Skinner didn't believe in any of that. And so when we build these systems that are committed to engineering people, to training people in certain ways, that's a political, not just a technological, not just a pedagogical decision. That's a political decision. And I think, again, that's not Dewey. That's not building democratic practices. That's someone who thinks they know what good outcomes should be, deciding who's the winner.
It's tough because I think that I don't think of myself as a Skinnerite. I don't know what those people are referred to as, and I am definitely a giant fan of Seymour Papert. So maybe I'm one, and I mean, I am fully willing to admit that sometimes I might be one of those dudes that is at a conference talking like Papert, but then, I'm also really into gamification and game-based learning, and I understand that those are about motivation and in external rewards and that kind of stuff. So I'm trying to square the conflict in my head with this.
I think that we might be able to think about game-based learning as being different than gamification.
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
I mean, I think that there is something about play and creativity that aren't necessarily the same as the sort of point systems or rewards.
No,
or,
yes, and those two are two totally different things, gamification and game-based learning.
Games get really dull if that's all they are, right?
Yeah.
There's a Georgia Tech professor, Ian Bogost, who made a Facebook game way back when Farmville was popular. He made a game called Cow Clicker, which was just to sort of point out how silly gamification was, that really the whole point was you just click on the cow.
Yeah.
It doesn't do anything. There's no, but that kind of stuff that's really dull. And even, that's not a game. That's a pigeon. That is a Skinnerian pigeon just going for the food pellet. That's not play. Pigeons aren't playing.
It's true. And listen, you're writing a whole book about this that now, I am so excited to talk about and to hear more about. Tell us more about teaching machines.
Yeah, the book will be out next year, provided we're all still around then.
Oh, God.
No, it's coming out from MIT Press. And I wanted to tell the history of ed tech, but not talk about contemporary technology. I think it's one of the problems that I often find with histories of ed tech, which is sometimes you'll get a survey class like this in, if you're doing a graduate work in education, that's sort of a history of ed tech. And it sort of starts with the Horn book, hundreds, thousands of years ago, and then crams in everything all the way up to the latest app, app that was released last week. And it gets really hard to talk about anything in detail. And the other part of that is that kind of history always seems like something replaced something old because that thing didn't work. And I'm not sure that that's how technology is. I don't think that that's how ed tech work. I don't think that somehow ed tech was really bad, in the early 1900s, and now ed tech is really amazing. I think it's still mostly pretty awful. So I wanted to tell a story of teaching machines, which of course were, B.F. Skinner is the best known inventor of a teaching machine. He wasn't the first, but he's the best known. And I wanted to show the ways in which I think a lot of ed tech that we talk about today is really based in ideas that are over 100 years old. This idea of personalization, which is something that tech executives in particular, reformers like Bill Gates and Mark Zuckerberg, seem to think that personalization is this silver bullet that's going to fix what's wrong with our education system. I wanted to trace the history of where it came from. And talk about it again without talking about the latest and greatest technologies, because that's what Skinner thought he was doing. He thought he was personalizing education. And then I'm hoping that, we can sort of ask questions then, like, is personalization then behaviorism? And if again, like I said earlier, if B.F. Skinner didn't believe in freedom, if he didn't believe in free will, then what does it mean that that's the kind of learning that we're adopting for schools?
Amazing. I can't wait to read it, and we'll have you on again when it comes out, because it sounds absolutely amazing. You've alluded to the chance that today's November 2nd. So we're talking on the eve of the election in the United States. I'm a Canadian, so I'm
jealous.
Yes, I hear that often, to be honest. I work for an American company, so all of my coworkers are nervous, and all of my friends, a lot of my friends are nervous. Everybody is nervous. I'm curious, on a scale of like 1 to 10, how nervous are you?
Oh, like a 24.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's talk about tomorrow. What do we feel like is going to happen tomorrow?
I think that in most places where people have not voted early, which is still, I should back up and say more people have already voted in this election than voted in 2016, which is incredible. And so I think that it's an indication that there's a great interest, a potential huge turnout, largest turnout perhaps in history, which is exciting, because democracy only works when people have their voice heard. Mm-hmm. So tomorrow, though, I think that, unfortunately, in many places there's going to be violence. Mm-hmm. I think there's going to be intimidation, and I think that the president is. I think the president is going to do anything he can to sow confusion and hatred, as he has done for the past 4+ years, and make people doubt what's happening, make people doubt the results of the election. I don't know what that's going to look like. I don't know what that's going to look like in terms of how law enforcement is going to respond. I don't know what that's going to look like in terms of how the courts are going to respond. In both cases, those are his allies, and will not necessarily follow the will of the people. So I think it's going to be a huge crisis for this country, no matter the outcome, no matter what happens tomorrow. And I don't think we'll know the results for a few more days, mm-hmm. At least. And then we have to see if Trump decides to drag things out legally. And then we'll have to see if he loses or if he wins, what he does to punish the country. And I think that it's just again, it comes back to this idea of like sort of Thorndike won, Dewey lost. I think that, the democratic institutions in the U.S. are under great attack, and schools are one of them. The election system is obviously one of them as well. But I think it's a terrible time for this country, and I think my heart really goes out to any teacher and parent and student right now, trying to navigate this moment, particularly mm-hmm. with so much trauma over what we've experienced the last 6, 7, 8 months, and then fear about the future.
Mm-hmm. we talk about politics on this podcast, and most education podcasts won't touch it. So I think much.
Which is so weird. School is political. Like I don't understand. I really don't understand that.
Yeah.
There's school is a political institution. We are political beings. We're political bodies. School is a democratic institution. To pretend like school is not political means, I think it means that you actually have to silence a lot of people's rights, a lot of people's identity. And I think that, again, it's part of the reason that I think our institutions are in trouble is because schools that pretend that they aren't political, I think are probably doing a great disservice to the students and teachers and communities that they purport to serve.
We agree completely. I think our numbers would be higher if we were, rainbows and sunshine all the time, like other folks. But we just it's just not the reality. And that's why we talk to you about, ed tech and how it's not all amazing, and we talk about politics. And I wanted to have one last kind of interesting speculative conversation a little bit about, it relates to elections. So let's say, fingers crossed, Biden wins. And so now we have this incredible opportunity to do, obviously a lot of things have to get kind of rebuilt, for lack of better words. Maybe we should start with reinstating some sort of a pandemic task force. How about? But we also have to, basically, I said this to someone just the other day, that the DOE in particular needs a pretty major house cleaning, immediately, in January. And I saw this tweet come across, I think it was yesterday, maybe the day before, about who the next education secretary may or may not be. And this interesting conversation about it not being someone who is the president of a school union, a teachers union. And I'm curious if you have any thoughts on, because I guess some of the contenders for, education secretary are presidents of teachers unions, and this person was opposed to it. What do you think about the next education secretary being a teacher, first off? And then what do you think the requisite skills or background of that educator maybe should be?
That's a great question. It's actually probably one of the few places in which I disagreed with the person I supported in the primary, who was Elizabeth Warren, because she promised that she would nominate a teacher as Secretary of Education, and I think it's crucial that the person has experience as an educator, but I'm not sure that I think that they need to have been a K through 12 teacher.
Good.
I think I would be fine, for example, with a professor,
yes,
a college professor. And I think the fact of the matter is, if you look at the Department of Education, because in the U.S. we don't have a federal system of education at the K through 12 level, there's really, I don't know how much policy is really about what the classroom teacher. The knowledge that a classroom teacher would have, I'm not sure that that's as applicable. Really, one of the biggest programs that the Department of Education runs, of course, is the student loan program. And I think that I would support somebody who was willing to forgive all student loans and work towards making higher education free. I think that what has to happen to fix education in this country is just a massive influx of money. But I would, if it ends up being of the president of a union, I wouldn't have any problem with that. I do think that it's important. It's incredibly important that teachers' voices are better heard if we look at what's happening right now, the sort of utter failure of the Department of Education, even with sort of its hands are tied in a lot of ways, but the utter failure to do anything during the pandemic to help make sure to push for PPE in schools or testing, to not standardized testing. I'm sure DeVos is still pushing for that. But for coronavirus testing, rapid testing in schools, there's just been no movement at the federal level to do the kinds of things and spend the kinds of money that has to happen for schools to be able to reopen safely. So that being said, I think it's also important to have somebody there who's willing to sort of push Biden to make sure that we are willing to spend the money that has to be spent to, like you say, to rebuild. I'm not sure if that's necessarily a union leader.
Yeah. It's not necessarily not a union leader, though, too, I guess.
True. Absolutely.
Is I think the argument.
I guess I would add one more point is I think that as we rebuild again, another thing that this pandemic has really, I'm sad to say even, that has laid bare is just, again, the grotesque inequalities in the United States. And I think that I would not want someone to run the Department of Education that wasn't equipped to absolutely address racial inequality in the U.S. And so, again, maybe that's a union person, maybe that's the head of a union, but maybe it's not. Maybe it's not.
As long as it gets done.
The teachers' unions in this country, I don't know that they necessarily have a great history of racial justice.
Well, that's listen. I am optimistic that when we speak in 2021, you will have a brand new book out.
Yes.
It will kick serious ass because I have very little doubt about that, and that we'll be talking about what a government led by President Joe Biden, hopefully, with, First Lady, who is an educator.
Exactly.
Seems like a pretty great thing to me.
Yes.
Pretty thoughtful woman she is. And it'd be wonderful.
Schools will have so much money that everyone will have 2 interactive whiteboards.
Right. And how can that go wrong?
What could go wrong?
What could go wrong? Audrey Watters, thanks so much for joining us on the podcast.
Thank you for having me, really.
Thanks for listening to OnEducation. My name is Glenn Irvin. My co-host is Mike Washburn. OnEducation is part of the On Podcast Media Network. You can listen to this show and many others by great educators like Monica Burns, Mike Matera, Tisha Richmond, and many more by visiting onpodcastmedia.com. Want to get in touch with us? Check out our website, oneducationpodcast.com. You can tweet us at oneducationpod. Mike is at Mr. Washburn on Twitter, and I can be found on Twitter at IrvSpanish. You can find us on Facebook by visiting facebook.com/oneducationpod. We're also on Instagram at oneducationpod. If you're enjoying the show and think others would too, we would be thrilled if you shared it with them. Please leave us a rating or review in Apple Podcasts or Google Podcasts. When you leave a rating, it gives our rankings a boost. This helps others discover the show. We want to thank our presenting sponsor, Participate, for supporting us. Check out participate.com to learn more about them. Thanks as always for listening, stay awesome, and see you soon.